The walker's left knee actuator seized 9 hours after I lost the relay buoy, and that was the moment I should have been afraid. I remember noting that fact the way you'd note a temperature reading. I was not afraid. I want that on the record before I tell you the rest of it, because everyone who has asked me about those 41 days has asked the same question first, and the answer never satisfies them. No, I was not afraid. I was busy. The Proboid-class walkers were built for exactly this kind of failure, which is to say, they were built to fail slowly enough that you had time to do something about it. 2 legs, a reinforced spine cavity, 11 days of base rations if you didn't move much, and a long-range channel that was supposed to bounce off the relay chain back to the carrier. The relay chain was gone. I'd watched it go, actually. A flicker on the dorsal sensor, then nothing, the kind of nothing that means the buoy didn't malfunction. It got eaten. I didn't know by what. I still don't, fully. It doesn't matter for this story. What mattered was the knee. A seized actuator on a bipedal scout walker in open dark is not a walking problem. It's a sitting problem. And I sat. I ran the diagnostics twice because the first run gave me a number I didn't like, and I wanted a second opinion from the same machine. The second run agreed with the first. 11 days of rations, no propulsion, no relay, and a short-range emergency channel that broadcast on a loop and occasionally, very occasionally, picked up a thread of something, chatter, automated traffic, once what might have been a voice, gone before I could be sure. I logged all of it. I logged the knee. I logged the rations. I made a list of things I could still do something about, and the list was longer than I expected, and I started working it. People assume the worst part of being stranded is the silence. It isn't. The worst part is the part where your own voice starts sounding strange to you, and you keep talking anyway because the alternative is worse. I talked to the log. Day 4. Ration down to a third. Knee still dead. Ran a structural check on the hull seam. Found a stress fracture I could patch with what I had. Day 9. Patched it. Day 14. Started cataloging mineral readings out the dorsal port, because there was nothing else productive to do with my hands, and idle hands on a stranded walker. Start finding wrong things to worry about. Day 21. Heard 4 seconds of something on the short channel that wasn't static. Logged the timestamp. Kept working. I want to be precise about what I mean by calm, because the word gets used carelessly. I was not serene. I was not at peace with my situation. I checked the math on my rations probably 40 times more than the math required, because checking it was something to do with the fear instead of something the fear got to do with me. There's a difference between not feeling a thing and not letting a thing make your decisions for you. I felt plenty. I just didn't let any of it onto the duty log, because the duty log was the only thing keeping the days in order, and the days in order were the only thing keeping me in order. By day 30, I'd stopped expecting anyone. That's not despair either. That's just arithmetic. 11 days of rations had become 31 because I'd cut myself to a 10th ration, and the 10th ration had become a routine, the way everything becomes a routine if you do it enough times in a row. I patched a second hull stress point. I rewired the short-range receiver twice, hoping to pull a stronger signal out of whatever kept brushing past the edge of it. On day 36, I got 11 seconds of voice traffic, not in any language I recognized, clipped and urgent, and then nothing again. I logged it as contact, unconfirmed, and went back to the rations math. The cutting torch came through the dorsal hatch, on what I'd later learn was day 41, local reckoning. I heard it before I saw it. A high whine against metal that didn't match any sound the walker itself made, and for the first time in 5 weeks, I felt something close to alarm, not because I was afraid of what was coming through the hull, but because I hadn't logged it yet, and the not logging bothered me more than the torch did. I finished the sentence I was on, then I picked up the short-range unit, in case whoever was cutting their way in wanted to talk first. They didn't, not right away. The hatch came free in a shower of slag and cold light, and 3 of them came through in suits the color of wet slate, and I remember the foremost one stopping completely still about a meter inside the hull, faceplate angled at me, not moving, the way you'd stop if you walked into a room expecting an empty house and found the lights on. I learned his name later, Garen Esk, salvage officer, 22 years in Tholrenic recovery work, a man who by his own account had pulled 40-some bodies and recovered maybe a dozen survivors out of dead hulls in that time, and every survivor he'd ever found had been found broken in one direction or another, screaming, catatonic, gone somewhere in the head that recovery couldn't follow them to. He told me afterward, in the debrief, that the protocol called for a body bag and a medic standing by, every time, because that's what 41 days alone in a dead hull does to anyone they'd ever cut out of one. I was sitting against the spine cavity with the duty log open on my knee, finishing a line about rationing the last of the protein paste, when he found me instead. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I didn't either. I was 3 words from the end of a sentence, and some habits don't break just because someone arrives to interrupt them. When I did look up, I said the only thing that seemed worth saying, which was that I had a working channel now if they wanted my logs, and would they mind giving me a minute to finish the entry first. I found out afterward that the silence in his report lasted considerably longer than the silence in the hull. He'd radioed his ship to confirm the recovery, and then, by his own admission, said nothing further for almost a full minute, because there was no line in the protocol for what he was looking at. The protocol had categories: deceased, unresponsive, psychologically compromised, requiring restraint. There was no category for a woman finishing her paperwork. What unsettled him, he told me this much later, once we'd both had time and distance enough that he could say it plainly, wasn't that I'd survived. Survival by itself is just a set of numbers that worked out. What unsettled him was that I'd survived in order, 41 days with no relay, no rescue beacon, no certainty that anyone was coming, and the log he eventually copied off my unit didn't read like a record of fear managed. It read like a shift report. Day 4, patch logged. Day 9, patch held. Day 21, contact unconfirmed. Day 41, rations nearly exhausted, hatch breach in progress, will resume log when able. He asked me, once, sitting across from me on the debrief deck with that same stillness he'd had in the hull, what had kept me from breaking. I told him the truth, which is that I never decided not to break. I decided to finish the next task, and then the one after that. 41 days is just a number you get to by doing that enough times in a row, the same way the rations get to 0 by being eaten one ration at a time. There wasn't a moment where I chose endurance over panic. There was only ever the next line in the log, and writing it. He filed his recovery report that night. I read it later, because by then, they'd stopped hiding things from me, having apparently decided there wasn't much point. The line that stayed with me wasn't about the walker, or the relay, or the rescue. It was a single recommendation, added at the bottom under his own name, flagged for review by people well above his rank, that Tholrenic threat doctrine on stranded human personnel be revised, on the basis that prolonged isolation, far from degrading a human operative, appeared in at least this instance, to leave one fully intact, fully functional, and, his word, not mine, undiminished. I don't think he meant it as a compliment. I think he meant it as a warning, filed in the calmest language he had, because the alternative was admitting how long he'd stood frozen in that hatch before he found the words to call it in.